In this video, we are going to show how to go about crashing tasks for an in-progress project with the intent of bringing the baseline, the current baseline back to the baseline finish. For this, we are going to identify activities which we need to crash. And for this project, there are the three activities at the bottom here. And they are linked in a resource critical path, not in a directly linked by precedence critical path, but in a resource critical path where the use of a tech writer in these three different resources is constraining the path to as shown. So we have calculated different options to crash. And we have figured out that by looking at the baseline finish and the current finish, we need to reduce by 11 days, 11.25 days. And we have looked at different options by crashing by overtime and crashing by additional resources for these two activities, and have figured that this is how we want to crash. That is, we'll take 1.5 times resources, or add 50% resources to activity 2, and use that to crash about 6 days. And then we'll use 20% additional resources on activity 1, which is the in-progress activity, and reduce for the remaining 6 days to roughly bring the finish date back to our baseline finish. Now let's assume for activity 1, where we are going to bring additional resources, the software architect, there isn't another software architect available with those skills to easily bring on the project, and there's concern about bringing another person at this point, and the software architect does not want to work with another new tech writer, so they just want to continue as the same team and are willing to do overtime. And so we'll go for the overtime options. And so we are looking for about 6 days. And even though it's more expensive, the organization has agreed to go for the overtime option. And roughly we are selecting an option where we would get about 6 days. And this requires working 15 hours per week overtime. That's 3 hours per week overtime. And by doing that, we can bring the remaining duration down 7.58 days, and it tells us how much work they will need to input on that. So the intent is really to show in this video both options on how to crash by using overtime and how to crash by using additional resources. So with that story, we are going to crash the first activity here using overtime. So let's go back to our project plan. So back onto the project plan. To make these changes, we'll need to go first. We'll make sure. Well, let's make sure that these activities are fixed work. So let's do that. Computer has gone slow for some reason, but oh well. Fixed work. Okay. And we'll do the same thing for this other activity. Okay, now for the first activity that we are going to reduce by overtime, we'll go to task usage view with that selected, so that just makes it convenient that when we enter this view, we already see that activity right on top. We'll add overtime as a row here. So I come here, click on O. That takes us to entries starting with O. We'll add overtime work, show. Okay, so now it will show us overtime work here. And we'll hit function F5 to go to 35, activity number 35, so we can see the activity entries on this time-phased view. And we'll then scroll to our status date of August 25, so that we can see the difference that happens when we make changes. We'll need additional columns, so let's make some room here. So this is remaining work, remaining cost, remaining duration, and we'll add remaining overtime work, and we'll add remaining overtime cost. Okay, now we are ready to make the changes. And just to point out, the status date is the end of Tuesday, so we'll see changes starting from Wednesday onwards here on the right side in the time-phased view. So now we'll go back to our Excel file and see the changes we are going to make. And so we are going to change the duration to 7.58 weeks. Let's go back, change duration. 7.58 weeks. Okay, so what it did, since we had fixed work, it increased the work amount on each of these days, kept the work at the same at 4.24 months. We'll go back and pick up how much work we are going to put, and we could put work in weeks, but since this worksheet has calculated the new work in months, I'll use that number, 5.21. I come back here, add that number here, 5.21 months. And so it has spread the work on both software architect and the tech writer. And so the work increased, and I guess it went back and increased our duration to 9.52 weeks to accommodate that. So we'll then allow some overtime, and overtime you have to enter resource by resource rather than at the task level. And so let's see the overtime required, and we have calculated resource by resource. In this case, since both work resources are being used at the same percentage, we can calculate this as one number for both of them, and so it's 0.71 months each. And so let's enter that here. 0.71 and 0.71. I guess we need to make the column a little larger so we can see the entries here. And what I just realized, I missed updating the overtime cost. So let's go do that. Resource sheet. And so software architect at 1.5 times will be 150, and the tech writer 1.5 times of 50 is 75. And we go back to our task usage view. So we'll have to go back to our activity, which was 35, function F5, 35. And we are back here. Let's scroll back to our status date of August 25. So you notice here on the side, until Tuesday, we have no overtime work. Once we added overtime, that picks up. And the first day it starts with a lower number, but then it settles on to a fixed number. And the costs have been calculated now that we have put the overtime costs in here. The work is 5.21 months that we entered. Duration got a little changed. Let's see here. Duration, we had come with 7.58. So let's make the duration the same. And we'll see a difference in the overtime per day and in work per day. So that's the level we want to work at. So we change the duration, but since it's fixed work setting, so by changing duration, the work is not changing. The same work is getting distributed better over the duration. And so now let's look at the cost is 71,039. And if we go back to our Excel file, we have calculated at 71,037. And so that's, I guess, about the best we can come as close to having an agreement between the two numbers. So that's activity is done in terms of crashing. We brought this duration down to 7.58 weeks from its original duration of 8.86 weeks. So we got a little bit over a week reduction here. The other activity was we are going to reduce by crash using additional resources rather than overtime. So let's include a column called assignment units. And so that will say how many people we are using here. And again, we'll scroll. So I'll hit function F5, go to activity 40. And so that's where it's starting somewhere in, after October 25 and going on from there. And so we are going to increase the resources to 150% each. And so you see, because it's fixed work, by increasing the resources, it reduced the duration to 0.67 months. Let's go back and look at our settings on what did we want to achieve here. Activity 2. So we are saying because of the efficiency, we actually would need 2.88 weeks. That's a little bit over 0.67 months. So we'll change that. 2.88 weeks. At 150% each. And the work is going to be 2.16 months. And so we need to change that. Because again, because of inefficiency, we'll have a work of 2.16 months. I guess I should have changed the other one first. So let's go back here. 2.88 weeks. Okay, and so now let's look at the cost. 8640, and we have 8648, so pretty close agreement. And so we have that activity crashed also. Now let's go back to our Gantt chart and see how it does look like. So the activities themselves have become smaller or shorter, I guess, by crashing. And I'm trying to just increase the view here. It's not okay. Well, I guess this. Oh well. So what we have to look at is now bringing the finish back to the baseline. So the second activity which we crashed, because that was directly connected to our end line. So that did pull back the finished milestone, and so that did pull back the finished milestone some. But since the other activity, they are linked on a resource critical path and not a directly critical path, we'll have to manually pull back the activity to close the gap here. And so to do that, we'll include well, let's see if we already have the columns. If I scroll to the right, we have baseline, start, and finish. And so we are going to make these corrections. We'll take the activities finish time here and make sure the following activity then starts at the same time, because the tech writer would be available now. Okay, so it pulled it back, and then we'll take its completion time and make that the starting time for the following task on the resource critical path. And that pulled in the finished milestone to our baseline finish milestone, or actually even a little bit earlier. So our baseline finish was 11:10 at 5 p.m. Now we are managing to finish the same date, but in the morning. And so with that, that completes the video showing how to go about crashing with either of the two options. And we showed an example of crashing by using overtime, and another example of crashing by using additional resources. And I'll stop here.